The lone wolf died with a silent accusation in its gaze, its yellow eyes fixed on the man named Jack. Blood stained the Texas dirt, spreading outward like a promise of things to come. Jack wiped his worn Bowie knife clean on his trousers, the blade, a testament to years of solitude and a war he had tried to forget. The land was a hard mistress, and the drought had made desperate creatures of them all. His pale blue eyes, a haunting echo of the man they called Widowmaker, scanned the horizon, a habit born of long memory. That's when he saw her. A shape moving erratically through the swirling dust, a horse stumbling, its rider slumped forward. As he approached the bay, mare finally collapsed, sending its rider tumbling into the dirt. A woman, Jack hadn't expected that. He knelt beside her, his large, calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he sought a pulse at her throat. It fluttered weak but present. Her face, pale beneath a film of dust and dried blood, was framed by dark hair spilling from beneath a battered hat. A thin gold band circled her finger. Married then? Or a widow? He took her back to Broken Creek Ranch, to the solid cabin his father had built and his mother had made a home. He laid her on his bed, the only proper one in the house. And in the warm glow of the lamplight he saw her true face, high cheekbones, a determined chin, and an aristocratic air that seemed to belong to another world entirely. Later she stirred her eyelids, fluttering open to reveal eyes the deep, unsettling green of summer sage. They were filled with fear and a startling clarity. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice carrying the cultured tones of Eastern money. "Broken Creek Ranch, Texas, Jack," replied, his voice rough from disuse. "Found you after your horse went down." She studied him, taking in his worn clothes and the 3-day beard, then the rifle he held loosely in his hand. Her gaze was sharp, assessing. "You have a name, sir?" she asked. "Thomas McGrady," he said. "Most folks just call me Jack." And so began the unspoken dance between them. They were a man who had chosen to be alone and a woman who had been running, both of them haunted by secrets as vast and empty as the Texas landscape outside. He found her papers in her saddlebag, a letter of introduction for a Mrs. Victoria Thornton from a Judge Hiram Sterling of Boston, Massachusetts. Boston was a world away. Before he could read more, she woke. She was gracious, surprisingly direct, but offered no explanations for her presence so far from her home. He offered her stew, and she ate with a quiet appreciation that seemed to fill the silent cabin. They spoke of the drought, of his father's old well that never ran dry, of the railroad men buying up land. He was a man of the land, and she was a woman of the city. Yet something flowed between them, a current as subtle and profound as the underground water his family's well had tapped. She was gone when he woke at dawn, but only to the chicken coop where she was talking to his hens as if they were old friends. "Her name's actually Hattie," he said, and she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face and made his chest tighten. He found himself drawn to her, to the way she carried herself, to the steel in her voice when she spoke of her past. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sheriff Wyatt Jenkins stood on his porch, his weathered face grave. "Heard there might have been some trouble out this way yesterday," the sheriff said. "Got visitors in town asking after a Mrs. Victoria Thornton. A man named Marcus Sterling, says he represents Western Frontier Railroad." The coffee cup in her hand clattered against its saucer. The past had caught up with her, and in that moment, she told them everything of her husband Charles Thornton, found dead, a supposed suicide, of the accidents that had followed, of Marcus Sterling, his brother who had tried to seize her inheritance. "Officially to escort me back to Boston," she said, her voice steady. "In reality, to ensure I never reach Boston alive." She told them of Charles's discovery. The railroad wasn't after land for tracks, but for something far more valuable in the midst of a historic drought: water. The Apache waterway, a mythical underground river that never ran dry. The air grew heavy with the weight of a revelation. Tom's jaw tightened. "Marcus is dangerous," Victoria insisted. "He has money, influence, and men willing to kill on his command." "Some fights choose you," Jack said, his eyes hardening to the color of winter ice. "This land has taught me that much." Before Victoria could object, a distant sound caught Tom's attention. Riders, 4 of them moving fast. "That'll be Sterling and his men," Jenkins said grimly. "Not waiting on formalities, are they?" Jack reached for his rifle, the old familiar clarity of a man prepared for battle returning to him. The Widowmaker awakening from a long slumber. The Devil's Gambit. The four horsemen pulled up 20 yards from the cabin, dust settling around them like a shroud. Marcus Sterling sat his black stallion pristine, despite the trail dust, his smile too wide, too confident. Beside him, hired guns, men with dead eyes and smooth holsters. But it was the fourth man who drew Jack's attention, a tall, lean man on a dun Mustang. Cole Hardin, a former cavalry scout with a reputation for tracking anything that leaves a shadow. Victoria emerged from the cabin, her chin lifted in defiance. Marcus always did prefer to let others handle his dirty work, she said quietly. Sterling dismounted, his voice dripping with false concern. My dear sister-in-law, what a fortunate discovery. We've been quite concerned for your safety. Jack stepped onto the porch, his rifle held casually, but visibly. This is private property, Mr. Sterling. The pleasant mask slipped for an instant, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. Her wishes are regrettably secondary to her welfare. The courts have granted me guardianship until her mental state improves. It was a bold-faced lie, but a dangerous one. Sheriff Jenkins stepped forward, his badge glinting in the sunday. I'll need to see the papers, Mr. Sterling. Until I see official documentation, Mrs. Thornton is free to remain wherever she chooses. A tense silence fell. It was Cole Hardin who broke the standoff. Legal matters take time. Mr. Sterling, he drawled, his voice a rough match for the landscape. Might be best to return to town and send for those papers you mentioned. Sterling's jaw tightened, but he conceded. He fixed Victoria with a cold stare. I'll return, sister dear, with all the necessary documentation to resolve this misunderstanding. Before riding away, Hardin lingered a moment, his gaze meeting Jack's. You still shoot the way they say you did at Gettysburg, he asked. The question hung in the air. Might want to remember how Hardin said. Tonight, he was gone, leaving Jack and Victoria alone with the weight of his warning. Can we trust him? She asked quietly. Don't know, Jack admitted. But we don't have the luxury of ignoring the warning. He knew what was coming. Sterling was done with legal pretenses. The time for talk was over. They rode hard for Broken Creek Ranch as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the dry land. They rode out to the old line shack, a defensible refuge. There, Victoria told him everything: her husband's research, the treacherous package from Texas, the Apache waterway, and Marcus's ruthless ambition. She revealed the truth: the Apache treasure wasn't gold, but a map to the underground water source. Jack pieced together the implications. His father's well, the one that never ran dry, sat on top of it. He rode into Gentry to consult the county records, discovering old Spanish and Army surveys that corroborated Victoria's story. The map showed the AWA Profunda, or deep water, and the Apache symbol for medicine water right on his property. It was all real. He and Victoria were ambushed by Cole Hardin, who revealed his true purpose. He had been hired by Sterling to track her, but his conscience wouldn't allow him to be part of what was coming. He revealed that Sterling had brought in more men, professional guns from Chicago, and was planning something for tonight. I've survived this long, Hardin said, by knowing when something doesn't smell right. Sterling smells wrong. He told them of Sterling's plan to dam the main source and control the flow to the entire region. It was a death sentence for anyone who wouldn't pay his price. With a cryptic message, Hardin rode away, leaving them with the knowledge that Broken Creek Ranch was about to become a battlefield. The hunter becomes the hunted. The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time they reached Broken Creek. The sky was painted in violent shades of red and gold. Jack immediately set to work preparing for the coming storm. He moved through his home, his sanctuary, like a stranger, cataloging its worth not in memories, but in its defensibility. He told Victoria they would not make their stand here. They were going to a ghost Cheyenne, the old medicine man who had taught him the ways of the land. Just as he began loading his father's old Springfield rifle, a rider approached fast from town. It was Sheriff Jenkins, his face grim, a fresh bruise darkening his cheekbone. Sterling's men caught me leaving town, the sheriff reported. Had to fight my way out. At least 10 men, maybe more, were on their way. They would reach the ranch in an hour, maybe less. Time enough, Jack said, his voice steady. He turned to Victoria. We're not making our stand here. The ranch is just buildings. The land is what matters. As they rode away, they saw the faint glow of torches in the distance, an advancing line of fire against the approaching darkness. They rode to a narrow canyon, a place hidden from prying eyes where the earth opened up and a narrow but steady stream flowed. Cheyenne appeared from the shadows, his presence as silent and unexpected as a breath of wind. He was an old man, his face a map of deep lines, but his eyes were as black and knowing as the canyon shadows. He immediately saw the death that Victoria carried with her. He told them of the Nahuti, the veins of Mother Earth, an underground river that had flowed for 10,000 years. He confirmed that Sterling was trying to control it. And he revealed the deepest secret, the main access point, a chamber known as the Mother Pool, was on Jack's land. Control the Mother Pool, control all water, Victoria said softly. The gravity of the situation settled over them like a physical weight. The tracker comes, Cheyenne said, his voice quiet. Alone. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Hardin was not a traitor. He was their last chance. Jack left Victoria and the sheriff to face him alone to know for sure whose side Hardin was on. From a natural ledge halfway up the canyon wall, Jack weighted the Springfield rifle, a cold, familiar weight in his hands. He watched as Cole Hardin dismounted at the canyon's rim and began his descent on foot. One shot clean and quick, and it would be over. But Jack's finger remained still on the trigger. Hardin was alone, as Cheyenne had said. If he had intended betrayal, he would not have come with such careful deliberation. Jack moved silently to a new position, and when Hardin reached the trail's bottom, Jack stepped from the shadows. Far enough, Hardin. The tracker froze, his hands carefully away from his weapons. Hardin revealed his true purpose. He had been tracking Sterling's operations for months, gathering evidence of his brutal land grabs and convenient accidents. He'd been taking Sterling's money while working as a federal agent. I was at Shiloh too, McGrady, he said. Different side, same mud. Saw things no man should see. Did things no man should do. That changes a person. He told them Sterling had brought in 11 men and planned to move on the water source tomorrow. He planned to kill every witness, starting with Victoria and Jack. Jack had his answer. He lowered his rifle. Come on then, others need to hear this. He led Hardin back to Cheyenne's dwelling, where the old Apache studied the tracker with an unreadable gaze before declaring he may speak. Truth or lies, his words will reveal him. The unending thirst. Hardin revealed everything. Sterling had found the maps at Jack's ranch and was bringing in engineers to dam the Mother Pool. Victoria's husband had been murdered for uncovering the truth. The water has flowed free for 10,000 years, Cheyenne said, his voice resonant in the firelit space. To dam it would be to dam the blood of the earth itself. Jack's ranch house was already a smoldering ruin. It was a race against time with no help coming. They would have to fight Sterling's men alone. We can't fight 11 armed men, Victoria protested. Not directly, Jack agreed. But we have advantages they don't. His gaze shifted to Cheyenne. Secrets they don't suspect. The old Apache revealed a hide-wrapped bundle containing a cavalry saber, an old revolver, and a bow made from dark wood. The rifle speaks too loudly, he explained. The bow whispers, and in darkness whispers carry farther than shouts. Their plan was audacious, to use the land itself as a weapon. Hardin would lead Sterling on a wild goose chase, feeding him false information. Jenkins would intercept any flanking movements. And Victoria, the Boston widow, would be the bait. They would use Sterling's obsession with finding her to lure him to the false shaft, a chamber filled with shifting sand. A deadfall trap, Hardin called it. With the right bait they'll come, Jack said, his gaze returning to Victoria. But only if you're willing. I'm willing, she said firmly. But I won't be helpless in this. I want to fight. Her determination was a flame in the darkness, a promise of a future forged in fire. And Jack, for the first time in years, felt a flicker of hope for something beyond solitude. The weeping eye of the earth. The sun broke across the Texas panhandle, illuminating a landscape of despair. From his vantage point on the ridge, Jack saw the charred remains of his cabin. The land was his only home now. Victoria and Jenkins rode toward their designated positions in what had become an improvised battlefield. Victoria, now in a practical riding skirt and duster, carried the weight of her role with an astonishing poise. They burned it all, Jack told her, his voice carefully neutral. Just wood and nails, she said, reading the controlled emotion beneath his stoic expression. The land is what matters. She held a leather portfolio empty of the damning documents. But Sterling wouldn't know that until he was close enough to spring the trap. Sterling's men spread out, searching for the Mother Pool. But Sterling himself was lured by a simple note from Hardin, a note mentioning documents and the Eastern Ridge. He came alone, or so he thought, with only Hardin at a discreet distance. Victoria positioned herself beside the false shaft, a solitary figure against the morning sky, her heart hammering against her ribs. When Sterling approached, she stood her ground. "The only explanation, Marcus, is your greed," she said, her voice steady. "Charles discovered what you were really planning." The mask of concern slipped. He lunged for the portfolio she held, and the earth opened up beneath him. The false shaft, a spirit trap prepared by Cheyenne, collapsed, trapping Sterling in a pit of dry, shifting soil. "Help me," he shouted, his voice thick with fear and a frantic desperation. "I'll pay you. The railroad shares the Boston properties, all of it." But Victoria stood firm. She had survived his schemes, and now he was drowning in the very earth he had sought to steal. The sounds of gunfire from the east told them Jenkins and Hardin had engaged Sterling's men, who were pinned down by fire from multiple directions. Victoria saw Jack at the edge of the pit, his Springfield in hand. "Seems you found yourself in a bind, Mr. Sterling," Jack observed, his voice neutral. He knelt, extending the rifle barrel, and as Sterling's hand reached for it, his other hand moved for a hidden derringer. But Jack, the Widowmaker, was faster. He disarmed Sterling with a crack of his boot and pinned him at the edge of the collapse. That, Jack said quietly, was unwise. Jenkins and Hardin appeared, leading the remaining gunmen, including Fisher, as prisoners. "Found something you might be interested in," McGrady, Hardin announced, tossing a satchel filled with real documents onto the ground. Incriminating correspondence about water rights. It was a trap built on lies, leading to a truth more damning than any of them could have imagined. And then Cheyenne appeared. "The water sleeps now," he said, pouring a shimmering liquid into the collapsing pit. "The mother pool returns to sleep. We seal the true one until those worthy of its gifts return." The ground rumbled, and the earth shifted, sealing the Apache waterway, redirecting the underground currents to new, unmapped channels. The empire Sterling had envisioned turned to dust. A new channel. 3 months passed before the rains came to the Texas Panhandle. The deluge transformed the landscape, washing away the dust and fire, leaving behind the promise of new life. Jack stood on the porch of his new cabin, watching the miracle unfold, the scent of wet earth filling his lungs. Victoria stood beside him, a woman of independent means, her husband's estate restored. She had come to tell him she was leaving. "The final paperwork is ready for my signature," she said. "The stage runs through Gentry next Wednesday." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. "What would you have me say?" Jack asked. "The truth," she replied simply. "Whatever that may be." Jack spoke of his years of solitude, of the walls he had built around himself, and of how her presence had challenged all he thought he knew. "I don't want you to go," he said. Cole Hardin rode up to the cabin in the pouring rain, bringing news that Sterling had been convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He also brought a legal notice for Victoria. Her husband's estate, her company shares, her properties in Boston, all had been restored to her. She was a woman of independent means, free to choose her own future. "Stay," Jack said simply, his voice low. "Build this place with me. Face whatever comes, drought or flood, hardship or plenty, together." Victoria's smile bloomed slowly. "Yes," she replied, "I will." They were interrupted by Sheriff Jenkins and Frank Whitaker, bringing news of the downpour. They invited them to a harvest dance, a chance to celebrate the beginning of a new season. And as they rode away, Hardin left them with a parting thought. "Heard you're rebuilding the south pasture fence next," he remarked. "Might be too much for one person to manage alone." It was an observation that held more meaning than its words. Jack and Victoria stood on the porch, their hands intertwined as the rain washed over their new home. They had chosen each other, and they would choose the land. A different kind of drought had ended. Later that evening, Cheyenne arrived, a silent, mysterious presence on the porch. He brought gifts. A turquoise pendant for Victoria, worn by women of my people who guarded the water spirits. And for Jack, a small clay vessel. "Water sleeps within the clay," Cheyenne said, waiting to awaken like the spirit of a warrior, dormant until needed. The old Apache told them the water would return when the balance was restored. "And us?" Victoria asked. "What do you believe about that?" Tom considered the question. "I believe," he said slowly, "that some things can't be explained, only experienced. Like rain after drought." The intimacy of his words was a new language for him. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I never expected you, Victoria Thornton. And yet here we are." Here we are, she agreed, leaning into his touch. The rain fell a benediction on their new life. Life at Broken Creek Ranch would never be the same. And for the first time in 40 years, Thomas McGrady was grateful for the end of his solitude. He had found a new life, a new purpose, and a new reason to believe in the truth of a whisper.